Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's second portion of tonight's meeting, Public Works and Recreation. I'm your chair, Jason Trombetta. Any change in order or any notice to public cell phones? There's nobody from the public at the moment, but just in case someone walks in, at least we're saying it. Any change in orders of items on the agenda? Seeing none. Disclosure of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? Seeing none, there are none. I don't see anybody here to request any items on the agenda. Consent agenda, is there none? There's no communication. We'll go right down to staff reports. Item PW0120, Drainage Superintendent Mark Jemison, Director of Public Works, Mr. DePaula. Recommendation report, RFD PW01-2020, appointment of GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited as Drainage Superintendent. The recommendation, the report, RFD PW01-2020, appointment of GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited as Drainage Superintendent dated January 21st, 2020 be received, and that the Director of Public Works and Recreation be authorized to enter into an agreement with GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited as a Drainage Superintendent, and that a bylaw be passed to appoint GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited as a Drainage Superintendent for the Corporation of the Township of West Lincoln, and that a bylaw 2019-67 be repealed. Looking for a mover, Councillor Riley, Councillor Gannan. Any comments or questions? Mr. Mayor?
So does this dissolve our relationship with Mr. Jemison?
Yeah, I guess I'll pass you to District Director DePaula. He'll probably give you an idea what's happened here.
Yeah, so through the chair to Mayor Bylsma, we have a service agreement with the Township of Wainfleet, and that agreement is coming up, and there was clauses in the agreement that if one municipality wants out of it, then they can provide us notice. And the Township of Wainfleet has a lot of municipal drain work coming up in the next year or two. So they've respectfully asked that they take on that our shared service or municipal drain superintendent. So our drainage superintendent is going to be providing services to Wainfleet full-time.
Okay.
So in the interim, we need to identify someone as a drainage superintendent in our bylaw. And GM Blue Plan Limited has done it for us in the past years when we were in the same situation.
Fair enough. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Director? Call the vote. All those in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to PW0220, Director of Public Works, Mr. DePaula. Recommendation RFD PW02-2020, Municipal Alcohol Policy. The recommendation of the report RFD PW02-2020, Municipal Alcohol Policy dated January 21st, 2020 be received, and that the Municipal Alcohol Policy POL REC 01-2020 as attached in the report RFD PW0-2020 be adopted by Council, and that Council adopts the amendments as noted in the attached Special Events Policy POL REC 03-2010 to concur with the proposed Municipal Alcohol Policy. I need a mover. Councillor Yonker, seconded by Councillor Gannan. Any comments or questions? Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had written down a couple notes here, so I just wanted to confirm what I was reading is correct. So when it gets to the policy outlining when it should be a security guard versus a police officer, I realize there's a difference between the size of the event, but there was something in it that it just kind of stuck with me, and it was, I think it was if in Appendix B where it said if deemed, like what is the, I guess the clear-cut criteria that staff will use for consistency in determining whether security guards are fine versus just sending requesting two police officers. I just know when I was going through that, I just didn't feel like it was, at least from my interpretation of it, it was as clear as, as I was expecting.
So through the chair to Councillor Riley, Appendix D of the Municipal Alcohol Policy kind of lays out the requirements for police or security, and it's just it lays out the type of events, right? Like for example, a private event would be by invitation only, right? Family, friends. So then there's a number of attendees that will, and depending on the type of event and the number of attendees, staff will determine whether it's security or police. So for like a private event where it's family, friends, you know,
It's like a Stag and Doe, let's say.
there'll be
or
no
something.
security, no police,
Okay.
right? Now, if it's a private event and there's 500 people, depending on the type of event, then we'll make that determination and so on. And the same thing with open events, right? Open events would be something that's just open to the public, right? Where you can't control how many people come, or you have an idea of how many people come. So
Yeah.
Appendix D kind of lays it out.
Okay.
So
trying
when
to bring
the
it up here.
event planner or when the event organizer puts their application forward, obviously staff will have a lot of dialogue with them to figure out the details, and staff will make a determination if there is any police or security, and if security is okay, or if police are required.
Okay.
So it's a combination of type of event, number of people, and depending on the risk.
So I just brought Appendix D back up, sorry, just to you again, Mr. Chairman, to the director. I think that where my confusion was is, you know, just from looking at face value, it says 1 to 375 people, referring to 2 security guards or 2 police officer when deemed. And it was the when deemed part, or when deemed, that I was just like, oh, is this gonna be just, you're obviously gonna assess it based by case by case, sorry, but again, I just wasn't, and I was referring to the open, I guess, events, not so much the private events. So again, that's, I guess, maybe where some of my confusion was, so, yeah, I think, I'll leave that for now, thank you.
Counselor Yonker?
Yeah, just to point out too, though, like you did mention like a family private party, like invite. Then you mentioned Buck and Doe. That's not a private. Those tend to be whoever shows up pays $10 to come in the door. That's not a private family event. Just so the public understands.
Imagine that might be by invitation, would that be part of private? Okay, but the ticket would be the invitation part, no? There might be some silver lining there.
Yeah.
No,
others-
I've gone to plenty of Stag and Does, I just would never go to a Stag and Do that I didn't know the people, so it would be invitation, you know what I mean? All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Just wanted to kind of highlight, so we did have a meeting, just want to highlight one of the meetings that we had. Madam CAO, Director of Public Works, myself, met with members of the various hall boards to discuss this policy and ask for their input. So just wanted to kind of get that on the record, that we did get some input from these 3 particular stakeholders amongst them. One of the things I thought was actually quite neat and a little bit foresightful was basically the idea that particularly at Abingdon and Wellandport, because of the nature of the parks, we expanded the policy to kind of include the potential for an event there that might be in the grounds. So, for example, you could potentially have a car show at Wellandport or Caister and have a beer tent and strictly speaking, the former policy just basically monitored the structures themselves, but now we have a policy that kind of addresses the public areas and might be very something for this council to think about if we think about maybe an event or something that we could draw to those locations in terms of their visioning for the future. I know we're talking about maybe master plans with respect to the public areas of the halls, and something that is part of our strat plan with respect to the rec portion of the strat plan. So just wanted to highlight that.
Madam CEO?
So my comments just are going back a wee bit. You'll note that in here, we talk about the fact that I do a lot of deeming. But if I'm gonna get stuck, I'm gonna be bringing it back to council, because some of these things are gonna be first-time events, and I think we have to make sure that we're protecting our property. So do not fear that we will be making rules. If there is an opportunity for review, we will, or a check-in, I'll be bringing it here. So when the requests come in, they aren't automatic, but they get vetted very seriously to make sure that all of these new guidelines are going to be met.
So just to follow up on that, so every time someone's gonna have a party, it's gonna come through us, I guess, is that the idea? Just to,
No, oh, sorry, excuse me,
sorry,
sorry.
it's the way it kinda came off. I
No,
wasn't-
okay, sorry. Fair enough. That would be terrible for you.
Well, it'd just be terrible for you guys too.
No, it's a policy, and this is council-directed policy, which is why it's here for approval, and most of the events we'll be able to figure out, but I wanted a provision that should there be an opportunity where something is a little different than it ever been anticipated before, a little bigger, I wanted to make sure that, if we needed to, we could bring it to council, which is very logical with our policy approaches anyway.
Okay, Counselor Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to go back through my notes here. I wish I had kind of connected it better with the pre-agenda. But I do recall reading somewhere that you guys had sought some input from the insurance company. Did I understand that correctly? Okay. So I think that's, if anything, is a nice indicator of how solid this this document is, to know that the insurance company looked it over, or at least provided some input or direction. So, as far as liability goes, that's, we're coming right from the individual who we'd have to go to should a situation occur. And then I think the other, I'm just trying to remember here, was it just the halls, through you, Mr. Chair, to, I guess I go to the director, was it just the halls that you guys did some consultations with, or did you try to reach out to any of the neighboring municipalities to see what the input they had?
Through the chair to Councilor Riley, we did meet with the hall boards because the hall boards manage those 3 halls that the mayor referred to earlier. So we wanted to make sure they were aware that what the purpose was and making sure they're on board. But we did reach out to municipalities, like neighboring municipalities, as well as other municipalities in Ontario that have a policy. We followed, we asked them questions, and every municipality does things differently. There's one extreme where some municipalities actually have a special events permit and they serve the alcohol at the events. That's one extreme. And then obviously there's the other extreme where some municipalities don't allow alcohol at all,
Okay.
right? So we reached out to a bunch of different municipalities when we were developing this.
Okay, thank you for your thoroughness. Thank you.
So I just got one question through you, to Mr. Director. So obviously we had that issue of the group that came in. How does this really alleviate any further things that come forward?
Okay, through the chair.
So if they want, so let's say, like I
Yep.
said, let's say that somebody wants to throw on
Yep.
an Ice Dogs event and they want to serve beer for a fundraiser. How does this policy, what have you've done to change so we kind of protect ourselves?
Well, as the report says, council adopted a special events policy back in 2010. And there was provisions for an event for alcohol, and it was pretty prescriptive of police and other things and wasn't very comprehensive. So this municipal alcohol policy does a bunch of things. Number one, it designates which areas we would allow alcohol, and that's Appendix A. And then it also clearly lays out roles and responsibilities of the event organizers and what they're responsible for. So it does a bunch of things. So the group that you're referring to, now we have a policy that has clear rules of engagement on what types of events you're allowed to host, where, and basically what the rules and responsibilities are.
Okay. And if you're not happy with that, then that's when it comes?
No.
Like you
That's when
decide,
it come to council.
you decide if it meets the policy and if that, I'm just confused when it comes to council, sorry, I'm confused on that.
And I apologize, I think I confused the issue. What I was trying to say was that this gives a lot of, it provides a lot of direction to staff to administer this. But because it is so fresh, I am anticipating that there could be something that is just out of the ordinary.
Okay.
But this lays out, like I'm just going over Appendix A again, and we lay out the facility, the location, the designated areas, the type of event. So it's going to be sort of straightforward to administer if they are within these areas. If somebody is unhappy, then that's something they would have to bring to council to
okay.
to have it amended or have it looked at anyway.
Sure. Counselor Riley?
I was just gonna say, at least now when I look at this, I would see like, I think the group was a hockey organization or association that had made a presentation. So should staff deem their event require police because it's open event, then if they were unhappy with that because of the cost, they would plead a case to council to see if there'd be a reconsideration. Is that what I'm understanding?
Either an exemption from the policy
Or
or a
exception.
change in the policy,
Okay.
or however council decides to deal with it.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
But I want us to be clear, like, this is the time for the policy. So if we know that event came through, and they're gonna ask, are we comfortable with this policy backing it up and having our staff enforce it this way? We're not gonna go through the whole work here of developing this policy, and I'm very pleased with it. I think there's enough flexibility, enough clarity, that staff can make wise decisions and interpret it. I don't think it's vague. I think it's very, very clear. This is the policy so that it doesn't have to come back. And so the appeal process, we should be backing this. If there's a kind of a unique situation, you know, and staff's a little bit unsure, I'm sure they're going to say, you know, this is unique for this reason. I think there's some legitimacy to it. But if we're not going to back staff on this policy, this is the time to change it, because we enact this, we have to defend it. So this is, I think that the whole point of this policy is to make it clear so we don't have every Tom, Dick, and Harry coming with their event, making an appeal because they didn't like the way that Lindsay over at the arena interpreted it for them. This is very clear. We have to be comfortable with it. And if we're going to open up the door to start hearing every appeal for every little thing, we're going to get ourselves tied down in council meetings. So this is the time and I'm comfortable with it. You know, I've gone through it. I've seen drafts. I've had stakeholder discussions, as I mentioned. I really just don't want us to come and hear this.
I think the hockey group shouldn't have came to council in the first place, I think I know we didn't have the policy, but with this, hopefully now it stops people at the door from making that appearance to council. I think,
Yeah.
like, this is our policy, staff, you know, they go to whoever, Madam CAO rules say that's our policy, they gotta live with it. I think that group shouldn't, I know what they have every right to come, but we have to stop that group, like, people coming to kind of change our policies. Once we have a policy in place, it's
Precisely.
firm. Madam CAO says, that's our policy, sorry, and I understand they come, but we all have to live by that policy. If we give any interpretation, any change, then it opens the doors for a lot more things.
Precisely. That's
So,
my point. Thanks for reiterating.
Councilor Gann, sorry.
Thank you. I was waiting actually to speak about this policy as well. I think further that maybe what Madam CAO was trying to say, at least what I heard in what she was trying to say, is that because this is the first run through on this, it may turn out that there is something that somehow got missed, or there's an anomaly somewhere. And when I say anomaly, I mean something that is unforeseen at this point, that somebody may come forward and say, but what about if I want to do whatever? And that's fine. I would like to just say that I am really pleased with this policy. I think, obviously, people who worked on it should be commended. It's obviously a lot of work to put something like this together. I think it's very clear. There are clear definitions about the types of events that can be held, whether they're public or open or not. There are clear definitions about things like, you know, what constitutes a strength of a drink. I mean, anything that anybody could potentially question, I think that you've all done a wonderful job of trying to head that off. Okay, what if they ask this, or what if they ask that? What else do we need to put in here? I think that if I were part of a group wanting to decide whether I was going to run an event, I think it has exactly the right amount of information that people would want. And I really do appreciate that not only did you have input from the insurance company, which is something that we did talk about, but certainly from the hall boards. It means that they will buy into supporting this policy because they've been part of it, and that's so much better than just implementing from top down a policy that they've had no say in. So good job.
Okay. I think that sums everything up, and I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Moving on, item PW0320, Project Manager Ray Vachon and Director of Public Works Mike Paula. Recommendation RFD PW03 2020 Bridge Rehabilitation Tender and Authorization to Negotiate. Recommendation that report RFD PW 03-2020, 2020 bridge rehabilitation tender and authorization to negotiate dated January 21st, 2020 be received, and that council authorizes staff to negotiate with the low bidder, Clearwater Structures, Inc., to undertake the rehabilitation of Bridge 16 and Bridge 29 and eliminate the Bridge 23 rehabilitation work to bring costs in line with the forthcoming amendment. I need a mover. Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Jonker. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. PW 04-20, amendment to budget, Manager of Parks and Recreation Facilities, Mr. Bob Dennison, Director of Public Works, Mike DePaula. Recommendation report RFD PW 04-2020, building assessments and budget amendment. The recommendation that report RFD PW 04-2020, building assessments, budget amendment dated January 21st, 2020 be received, and that council authorizes McIntosh Perry Limited to undertake the project in the amount of $60,729 plus HST in accordance with the tendering purchase policy POL T-01-2015, and that council approved the budget amendment of $20,000 to fund the shortfall identified for the building assessment project through a transfer from the facility reserve, and that a bylaw be passed to authorize the mayor and the clerk to enter into an agreement with McIntosh Perry Limited. I need a mover. Mr. Mayor, seconded by Councillor Riley. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to PW 05-20, Director of Public Works Recreation. Recommendation RFD PW 05-20, an always stop warrant, Industrial Park Road and Spring Creek Road. The recommendation that report RFD PW 05-2020, an always stop warrant, Industrial Park Road and Spring Creek Road dated January 21st, 2020 be received, and that council approve the recommended changes to make the intersection always stop, and that council pass a bylaw to amend the stop sign locations listed in Schedule P of Bylaw 89-2000 as outlined in this report. I need a mover. Councillor Riley, a seconder. Councillor Gannan. Any comments or questions? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go on the record and say that I think this is an excellent opportunity to control that intersection. I think it's very proactive. I know there's some growth commercially happening in that area. I know it's been a high impact collision area for years now. So I want to thank the Director of Public Works for finding and I guess doing the studies and verifying that it does qualify. I'm hopeful that during the conversion of a four-way stop, there'll possibly be some more than just a stop sign, maybe some line. Without getting too side-railed on this, one of the workshops I did in Roma was actually about traffic calming measures and often lack of how do I describe it? Like just having thicker bands of paint on the ground that indicate where to stop. Like sometimes it's just those little subtleties that allow people to actually catch it, and that seems to be one of the common issues is just trying to take the driver from being in tunnel vision to more aware of their surroundings. So when I saw this recommendation, I thought it was great. I know was last March or so we had someone had emailed us and shared a story of a situation where somebody they know and had been in an accident in that area, and the study at that time didn't indicate that it meets that qualification. So now I'm happy to see that since then, and the study that was shared with us, it clearly traffic has increased. So this is an excellent idea, and I just want to support staff on this. So thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, again, I know these things tend to be anecdotally driven, but I just wanted to reiterate what Councillor Riley said, that we have studied it. It's been an intersection of concern for us. It's never been warranted before, but now the traffic patterns have changed there and will continue to change, and so it's warranted, and that's the key. This is not an exception. We're not, going out on our own here. We let the science and the data determine when it's appropriate, and this has met those, so I just want to get that also on the record. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to PW 06-20, Director of Public Works, Mr. DePaula, the official opening of the West Lincoln Community Center. It's officially open, I guess, now. After this date, I guess that's what's it's saying to us. Can you give us a little bit of information on it?
Yeah, I just want to provide a verbal update. So staff, well, as you're aware, we had a soft opening on Family Day of 2019. And, the building has been open for a good year now. So I think this Family Day, February 17, 2020, staff is working on a day of events to kind of have, I don't know, 1-year anniversary grand opening of the center, now that it's been in operation for a year. I think the key thing in this event will be unveiling the donor wall. That hasn't been installed yet, but our contractor will be putting that up over the next few weeks, and we'll keep it covered, and we'll unveil the donor wall during that day. There'll be some public. Perhaps we'll have some dodgeball in the gymnasium to showcase the gymnasium space, and we tried to get the Ice Dogs in to showcase the hockey arena, but unfortunately on Family Day, they don't do any public events, so we'll probably go back to having the firefighters play the West Lincoln Minor Hockey Association coaches. So staff are currently working out those details, but that's the plan for Family Day this year.
Okay, that's excellent. Any questions? Do you have, Councillor Yonker?
I'd like to play against the firefighters, so if you're looking for an old defenseman, mayor maybe.
You look more like a dodgeball kind of guy.
Well, that too, but that throws my shoulder out.
So I got a question. So does this, now this is totally off, I know not to spoil the opening, but does that mean now we have finally assumed the building? Mr. Director?
No, the
Okay.
job isn't, the contractor hasn't.
Because it's
reached
only
the-
a year, it's a year after, that's why I was asking.
Yeah,
so-
so the way the contract, like, there's certain contract items that the contractor hasn't completed yet,
Okay.
so the contractor doesn't have total completion, but we do have occupancy.
Okay,
And the way the contract's written is, once we grant them total completion, there's a 2-year maintenance period after that date.
thank you, that's the answer I was looking for, perfect, thank you. Moving on to item PW 0720, any members of council, anything they want to say that didn't say at the last meeting? Yeah, Mr. Mayor?
With respect to Public Works item, tomorrow afternoon at 2:00, there will be kind of a public announcement about OSIP funding, OSIF, the F one. OSIF funding at the Reese Bridge. So there'll be some dignitaries from 4 municipalities there, as well as dignitaries from the province, and Sam Osterhoff, our MPP. They're going to make the announcement at our newly finished Reese Bridge. So that's at 2:00 tomorrow, and there's kind of a little parkette just kind of below it. And so just wanted to highlight that.
Okay. There's no new business, there's no confidential matters, and so I'll adjourn this meeting at 9:41. Thank you.